This time we will reconvene and continue the Planning Commission meeting for the 28th of November that we started at 9 a.m. this morning and then adjourned at noon and are back now for a couple more items. So we do have a quorum present. I don't think there's a need for a roll call. For anyone that may be here and did not hear for the items tonight, the vintage, which is the second item on the agenda, is simply going to be a continuing. They've asked for it to be removed, and there's nothing being brought forward at this time except to continue that they can come back at a later date. No date has been selected or anything at this time, and we have no information as to what they're bringing back. So when we get to the second item, it's just going to be to continue that item indefinitely. So, but before we get to that, first item on the agenda for this evening will be ZMA-18-156 for possible action to consider a request for a zoning map amendment to change the zoning of 5 properties, 3 that are split zone retail, commercial, RC, and single family 1 acre SF1A, and 2 that are zoned single family 1 acre SF1A to retail commercial RC located at 4530 and 4580 Cochise Street, APN 009-265-01-02-03 and 009-267-06 and 07. Hope.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chairman explained, the applicant is seeking to rezone the subject properties so that the entire property is zoned retail commercial. The applicants also indicated an interest in improving the land for multifamily development. But if the rezoning were to be approved, the multifamily development would require a special use permit. There is no application for a special use permit. This is purely a zoning map amendment. The board is authorized to approve amendments to the zoning map. The Planning Commission makes recommendations to the board. When you consider a zoning map amendment, you're considering 3 findings of fact. Each of the 3 findings have to be made in the affirmative. I'll go through each of those 3 findings with you. What I have up right now is the master plan on the board. The first finding is compliance with the master plan. As we discussed earlier this morning, the master plan is a policy document that outlines the city's vision and goals for the future and provides guidance for making choices regarding long-range needs. So you all deal with special use permits and things like variances all the time, and you always have to say, is this consistent with the master plan? We always go back to our master plans to help make our decisions. The zoning map is a tool that implements the master plan. In this case, in the case of this property and the property pretty much around it, Voltaire being a bit of a boundary between the commercial and the residential, the master plan designation is community regional commercial. That designation is characterized in the master plan as a mix of retail and commercial services and a concentrated and unified center that serves the local community but may include larger retail centers. The zoning districts that correspond to this master plan designation are general commercial, retail commercial, neighborhood business, and tourist commercial. So the current zoning is inconsistent with our master plan. The proposed zoning will create consistency with the master plan and allow for implementation of the master plan. The second finding is land use compatibility. And a few weeks ago, or maybe a month or so ago, we had another zoning map application in the same area. And this is the part we kind of struggled with, I think, and we talked a lot about. Again, this area, and I said it then, I'll say it now, has been partially developed with low-intensity uses that don't require connections to public sewer. To the extent it is developed, it's improved with homes that are served by leach field and septic tanks. Although there is some development, 47% of the land bounded by Clearview, Voltaire, Cochise, and Highway 50 is vacant. And I show this on the graphic that I have in front of you. The yellow areas are residential and the red areas are commercial. So you can see we have a lot of vacant land there, and then we have low-intensity uses. This is an area that's going through a transition, particularly due to the recent connection of the interstate with Highway 395. Property to the east of Cochise has been, and that's the green on the board, has submitted building permits for the commercial development, and you may have read about the Chick-fil-A and the Starbucks. Property to the north to the site, which is in the blue, it has a site improvement permit pending for a 75-unit, zero lot line residential development. Property 2 blocks to the north, which is in the purple, is currently under construction for a 370-unit apartment complex. And in the gray is a zoning map amendment that was recently approved by the Board of Supervisors to allow the land to be rezoned to commercial. This zoning map amendment will allow the commercial services to establish, which will support this developing portion of the city. To the extent development is zoned retail commercial and is adjacent to residential zoning, per our existing zoning ordinance, the setback would be 30 feet, whereas if it wasn't adjacent to a residential district, it would be 0. There's also limitations on lighting heights, and there's screening required of parking areas when you're adjacent to residential. So the code builds in protections, if you will, between commercial and residential uses. Staff finds that with the construction of the freeway, the single-family residential uses currently in the community regional commercial designation land will transition over time to more intensive uses. Therefore, staff can make finding 2 on land use compatibility. For finding 3 is that the proposed amendment will not negatively impact existing and planned public services or facilities and will not adversely impact the public health, safety, and welfare. You read in the staff report that the engineering staff found that the capacities of the city sewer, water, storm drain, and transportation systems appear to be sufficient to meet the demand that may potentially be imposed by a project allowed by the proposed zoning. Of course, when an actual project came in, they would do a traffic impact analysis, and the infrastructure in terms of water and sewer and stormwater would be looked at specific to that project. That we're not there yet. Right now, we're looking at the zoning map amendment and the 3 findings of fact for a zoning map amendment. So staff has been able to make those findings in the affirmative, and we are recommending approval. I will introduce Randy Walker, who is representing this project, and I'm happy to answer questions.
I noticed that there is a home on that current property, and you mentioned under discussion the fact as the home is lawfully established, its use may continue. Obviously, that's not the plan for that area if they're putting 147 units in there, correct?
Again, we don't have an application for a special use permit. With the application materials, the applicant did indicate an interest in the multifamily and did include a site plan
Gotcha.
showing the multifamily, which just showed the elimination of that home.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff?
So, hope you and I go around and around and around about these findings. So, the finding 2 that says it will not have a detrimental impact to other properties in the vicinity. So, does that mean just the commercial properties that it won't have a detrimental impact on, or does that also mean the residential properties that surround this area? Because I'm guessing detrimental impact is, one person's potato, the other person's potato, that while it might not impact a commercial development, it is definitely going to impact residential in that area. And so like I say, I always have a little bit of a angst with this particular finding. Thank you.
Other questions for staff? If none, would like to come forward, please?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Can I turn it on? Oh. Now can you hear me okay? Okay. For the record, Randy Walter with Places Consulting. I'm here representing Mr. Bob French and Mr. Steve Doncho, the two owners of this property, on their application for the zone change that's in front of you today. With me this evening is Steve Doncho. He's in the audience if you care to have any questions for him as the owner. And I also have my traffic engineer, Lauren Chilton, here to help us with the traffic side of this application. I'm just going to emphasize a couple of things that are in Hope's staff report. I think she's done an excellent job of outlining the findings that you need to make for this particular proposal. It is a proposal that basically brings the existing property into conformance with your master plan. I think it's important that we understand that the master plan is really your vision, and it's a vision that, from my perspective, looking at it as an outsider, is very appropriate for this area. With the connection of the freeway to 395 and all of that work that's been done, this area has an opportunity to provide for some significant increase in intensity of development. And your city's been pretty forward about making sure that there's adequate facilities available to make that happen. The picture that you see up in front just basically shows the current master plan. The black line shows the properties that are involved. This area is in your community regional commercial designation. The property to the north, that yellow with the kind of hatch that's in it, is a mixed-use residential designation, which we're going to typically probably echo a little bit in our application for a special use permit that you'll probably see sometime after the first of the year. That worked. I want to comment on the finding number 2, which talks about compatibility with existing uses. When we first started looking at this piece of property for the property owners, that goes back to, I don't know, 05, 06, somewhere in that time span. We looked at this piece of property for what the master plan had to designate it for, which was for commercial and retail. We looked at it as an office complex and also a retail complex. Did a lot of planning work at that point on that piece. They attempted to market it for that purpose, and as you know, the downturn in 2008 and everything else that happened did not help any of that marketing strategy at all. At this particular point in time, they've had much more interest in multifamily, which is why we're coming back in ultimately with a special use permit. This particular neighborhood is really a mixed-use neighborhood. It's one of the more mixed-use neighborhoods I've ever seen from a planning perspective. You have not only retail, general commercial, neighborhood commercial, services, medical, entertainment. There's a whole variety of uses in this neighborhood, all within walking distance of this particular site. It's one of the things that really helps benefit the site from a residential standpoint, gives people that are potentially living there in the future the opportunity to have the benefit of those facilities in walking distance of where they live. Very unique kind of combination. Your third finding deals with not negatively impacting public services and facilities. The particular project that we're looking at here, and I'm going to try to see if I can find this cursor and put it where I want to put it. Maybe. Where is it? Oh, there it is. This is Cochise. This is Overland. And this is Voltaire. This doesn't work very well. Looking at it just from an impact standpoint of adjacent, whoop, that went too far. Now I have to go back. Hold on. Me and technology are not the greatest of friends. Looking at it from an impact standpoint in terms of adjacent properties, not only is it a very mixed-use neighborhood, the neighborhood to the north is designated for higher density residential. To the east is existing commercial retail. To the west is residential that's significantly elevated from this particular site. And if you folks have been out on that particular piece of property, Voltaire is at a much higher elevation than the rest of the property, and the residential development, existing residential to the north, is even higher than that. That separation vertically is probably as much of a savings on impact as you can think of from a difference comparison of commercial to residential. To the south, you have existing single-family residential that, as Hope mentioned, in your code, you've got provisions there for additional setbacks, landscaping, fencing, and stuff like that to minimize the impact. The other component that you need to understand on this particular site is because of those constraints of those other residential uses, we will be, here I go again, there it is. We'll be accessing off of Overland and off of Cochise, simply because it's the most logical way to access this, minimize the impact to those existing residential people that are on the west and the south. From an improvement standpoint, there's currently existing sewer and water in Cochise. There's existing sewer and water in Overland. We're going to be extending the sewer and water in Overland up to Voltaire. There'll be a water connection that'll occur and a PRV installed that will connect an upper level water system with the lower pressure water system, so that improves the capacity and availability of that water system for this project, as well as improving the reliability of the overall system by making a connection between those two. From a storm drain standpoint, we will be helping the city work on and it's really off of this sheet, a connection to the storm drain outlet that's on Carson Street on Appian, or is that right? Appian Way. And making a connection, building a portion of that major storm sewer that actually serve a much larger area than just this project, and extend all our storm drain to that location. So that'll be something we'll be working with from the city's perspective. Keep in mind, these are all things that we're working with your city at this point for the upcoming special use permit. That's not in front of you, but we need to do the zone change at this point to move it forward. Now I'd like to talk about the other impact, which is the traffic analysis. We actually did a very, very detailed traffic analysis on this project. In anticipation of the special use permit, we've included it with the zone change so that you have a better concept of how this whole system will work ultimately.
Good evening, Lauren Chilson with Traffic Works. And we did prepare an initial traffic study and analysis to make sure that the zone change and this next contemplated piece of work, the application, would work. We studied the 3 intersections numbered there on Cochise Street and found that today the traffic volumes are very low out there, and all those intersections function at level service A, which is the highest level. We took that analysis all the way out to 2040 and assumed some pretty aggressive growth rates there, recognizing there are other projects in the vicinity that are approved and in the works. So we have a growth rate that's 10% per year going out for 20 years. Normal growth rates are more in the order of 1 to 2%. We use 10 to make sure that we've covered that based on population estimates, and so we believe we have an analysis that covers that long-term growth. Even with that growth and the project added, the intersections function within city policy at level service C or better on all movements, which is still very good. And so those intersections in their current configurations can accommodate the project. And we did not find any significant impacts or issues that would require mitigation for the zone change in that future project. So happy to answer further questions later.
Respectfully request that the commission consider recommendation of approval to the board based on the findings that are outlined in your staff report. I'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Any questions for the applicant? I don't know if this be the applicant or to the staff, but I'm just curious, with the master plan that's up there now, the one to the north, why is that not also commercial? I mean, they've got commercial on either side of that one little section that's yellow there. Is there a reason that wasn't included in?
That was before my day. I'm not really certain.
It's like it comes right up to that point, then it goes back to the 1 acre or whatever.
The Clearview Ridge is designated mixed-use residential because I think it was approved at the time of the master plan adoption, or was in the process, so it was a residential development.
And no other questions for the applicant?
Oh.
Yes, no?
I have a staff question.
Oh, okay, staff question.
Elise Monroy for the record, and I think my question is just hopefully to benefit the record and then the public. So I think that it makes sense to put these 2 land uses together. I think it helps to promote a more walkable community, like Mr. Walter noted, but kind of on those lines, one of the residents that provided public comment noted that there needed to be some improvements to sidewalks and to the area. So are those types of things, those will be considered as we move through the special use permit and things like that? Nodding your head yes, so yes?
For the record, Hope Sullivan, Planning Manager, yes, things like that are addressed when we have a project in front of us. Right now, what you have is a zoning map amendment. Zoning map amendment, you consider the 3 findings of facts, but you cannot condition it. We then have all sorts of city standards on roadways, sidewalks, bikeways, things like that, that get implemented at the time we consider a development.
Okay, no more questions for the applicant. We'll open it up for any public comment.
I'm getting the hang of it now. I live on Appian, the north side of Appian, my name is Greg Wilson. Yeah, and I live on the north side of Appian. There's 4 houses there, and I think the master plan makes sense to me, but sometimes plans don't always go as planned. And I think what's happening is you're going to have a lot of new buildings and a lot of new building in the south end of town. It's the first thing people see when they come into town, and it's going to leave 4 houses there that people aren't going to want to live in anymore, and we're going to rent them out, and that usually ends up, the paint goes downhill, the yards go downhill, and it's really not going to look good. It's usually what happens with rentals, and when you have 150 units going behind you and a hotel going in front of you, I just don't see any reason to carry on other than just renting it out for me, and I've talked to my neighbors and they feel the same. So as far as your master plan goes, I know it's not time to talk about the other issues, and I don't know when it's time to talk about the fence, because that's my backyard. I've got a lot of nice trees in that area, and I would be concerned about what kind of divider would be required. Do you understand where I live? On Voltaire in Appian, the top house there. So a divider, would the fence be 6 feet tall? Is it wood? Is it stone? Block? What kind of buffer would we have there?
Randy Walter with Place Consulting, representing the property owners. There's probably a variety of things that could be done there. At this point, when we come through with a special use permit, we'll look at that fence detail. If you've got some trees there that we need to kind of move the fence more on our property to keep it away from your trees, that's something that we could certainly look at. There's a variety of options we have. I think the code only requires basically a 6-foot screen fence, if I remember correctly.
Screen fence, is that chain link?
No, it'd have to be a visual screen, a solid wood fence.
Gotcha, okay. All right, well, I just wanted to point out the city plan, which I live there, I can see it with the intersection, but I don't know, what normally would happen in a situation if builders make offers on the other 4 houses or whatever, but to just leave them there without consideration for what it's going to look like. If you got I don't know if it's going to be a Hilton or what, kind of hotel there, or maybe none. But whatever it is, those 4 houses should be taken into consideration. So anyway, thank you.
Any other public comment on this item?
Voila. My name is Suzanne Fox. I'm here on an entirely different matter, as most of you know. However, I drive by that area at least once a day, every single day, 7 days a week. And I'm wondering if anybody, you gentlemen, the builders, have considered the environmental dangers of building on such a very steep, hilly area. We've just recently had some terrible wildfires in California, and in fact, a couple of years ago, or year or so ago, there was a fire right up by the casino, and that was pretty scary for a lot of the people who live in that area. And although fire travels faster uphill than down, that's less a consideration of floods. It's not always going to be dry here. We have wet winters, we have dry winters. And floods go a lot faster downhill than they do uphill. And I look at that and I'm looking at the building now, and I'm wondering, how are all those rocks going to stay in place if we have a flood? And in addition, we have earthquakes in Carson City. And if there were an earthquake there, a lot of buildings would be tumbling down. So I think that's an essential consideration for approving any kind of building, especially if it's going to be more than one story or maybe a two-story home. And that's it. I'll finish signing in. Thank you.
Any other public comment on this particular rezoning item? If not, we'll bring it back for discussion or a motion.
I move to recommend the Board of Supervisors approval of ZMA-18-156, a zoning map amendment to change the zoning from split zone single-family 1 acre and retail commercial from single-family 1 acre to retail commercial on property located at 4530 and 4580 Cochise Street, APN numbers 009-265-01, -02-03 and 009-267-06-07 based on the findings contained in the staff report.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Borders seconds. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Moving on, E10, TPUD-16-092-1, for possible action to continue to a date uncertain, a request for a modification to a tentative plan unit development known as the Vintage at Kings Canyon, to revise the lot layout, to modify the street designations from private to public, to modify the methodology for measuring building heights, to modify the requirements that the homeowners association maintain internal streets, and to modify the project phasing plan on property that is located on the west side of Mountain Street, extending to Ormsby Boulevard and west to Ormsby Boulevard, including property addressed as 1450 Mountain Street, APN 009-12-21, 007-573-09, 007-573-10, and 007-573-11. Hope?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You have a memo from me in your packet explaining that the applicant has requested a continuation of this item. I believe there are people in the audience who want to make public comment. You may hear public comment, but you have no materials to engage in any type of discussion. I don't know if the application will come back. If and when it does, we will renotice to everybody for a public hearing. But at this point, the recommendation is a continuation to date uncertain.
Thank you. Questions for staff, Commissioner Borders?
The caption that we read talks about some issues that they want to change. Since they are not here and they have pulled that, does that mean that they are totally restricted to these items, or when they come back, is it I'm just wondering, we just captured all these things that they said they wanted to change, and now they pulled their request, so we're just back where we started from, in essence, like we're fat, dumb, and happy.
I don't know about fat, dumb, and happy. They have an entitlement right now. They received that entitlement on December 1, 2016. That exists. They contemplated some changes. We noticed for those changes. They've requested a continuation. Again, if and when they come back, I don't know what the application will look like, and I don't know if that description that you just read will be the description that you're considering at that time.
Other questions for staff? No applicants, so public comment. Anyone wish to comment on this item? Again, reminding you that there's nothing we can state or do or anything because we have no idea what's going to come forward.
For the record, Maxine Neitz, member of Save Open Space, Carson City. Although my remarks here are my own tonight, we have not polled the membership for a specific comment on this. We are disappointed. We still are disappointed with the original approval that 2 years ago, and we are even more disappointed with the request that came into planning that was pulled for possible reinsertion into our city sometime later in the future. There are many, many additional issues with that, and one of the things that the mayor has said in the past is that he values the citizens of Carson City and that Carson City values its citizens. And since this development is going to be directed primarily at non-Carson City citizens, we question the entire thing, in addition to the fact that there's been a change in the applicant on this application from previous applications, and we ourselves did a rather expensive and extensive mailer, and we're going to be asking them to help us defray the cost of that, since that was done based on their application. But what I really would like to say is that we know that there will be another staff report at the time of the new application if it does come back, and we would like to formally give to staff a list of conditions we would like to see imposed on this development if it should go forward.
Other public comment?
My name is Carrie Ingbar. I live up in the Silver Oak area. Lived in Carson City for many, many years. I didn't like the proposal for this high-end senior living community when it first came forward, and it was sold to us as a, as I say, high-end gated community. I don't see how you can have a continuation to modify roads from private to public when you have a gated community. I don't know how you have a public road going through it. The gated community was there for the safety of the seniors that would be living there, to keep people from driving through and that sort of thing. Just give them a little more security. I don't think modify a methodology for building height. I don't know why there's a change in that. I mean, don't we measure building height in a certain way? Why do they need to come up with their own? The requirement for the homeowners association to maintain the streets, they before said yes, they would, the development would be responsible for maintaining streets. So all of a sudden, is this now going to become the community's cost, especially since we now have a public road through this private gated community. Maybe it's no longer going to be a private gated community for seniors. I just don't see any reason to give them a continuance on these kind of changes they want to make, because I think they're inconsistent with what they told us about in the first place. Thank you.
Other public comment? Seeing none, bring it back for discussion or questions or a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to continue item TPUD 16-092-1, a request for a modification to the tentative planned unit development known as the Vintage at Kings Canyon to a date uncertain as requested by the applicant.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? I'll second that. Or Elise, I'll second it. Fine. It will be continued to a date unknown. Okay, moving forward, next on the agenda would be staff reports.
Thank you. Just a couple quick updates on, at the November 15th Board of Supervisors meeting, they approved the zoning map amendment in that same vicinity, Appian Way, Cochise, on second reading, so that was approved as recommended by the Planning Commission. There weren't any other items from the Planning Commission that went to the board in November. Reminder, our December Planning Commission meeting is a little early, week early due to the holidays. It's on Wednesday, December 19th, and it will be at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, because that's when the room's available, not in the evening. And we only have one item scheduled so far. Actually, we have two items scheduled. We have a special use permit for a sign at Fandango, sign height. And coincidentally, we're going to give you a report on the South Carson Street Complete Streets project that's currently under design. So so the Public Works will be here to give you an update on where they are in the design of that. And that's all I have.
So at this point, it looks like it might be a rather short meeting. Commissioner reports or comments? Seeing none, one last opportunity for public comment, if anyone wants to comment before the meeting is adjourned. Seeing none, I'll take a motion for adjournment.
I so moved.
Commissioner Tingle, second by Commissioner Borders. All in favor, aye. Adjourned.